So today we are planning to talk about working with ADHD in the counseling settings. And I don't know how many of you have neurodivergent clients, but I really hope today's session will help you. First, I'd like to start with ethical considerations. We are making sure in here we are in an adult capacity with an okay position, including all the differences and keeping confidentiality, taking responsibility for our countertransferential and transferential responses, and checking our assumptions about others and different topics and different ideas. So I would like to create a warm, welcoming, open-minded kind of space where you can use your wisdom and openness and be here. The session is recorded, and I have a little firefly as well, just transcribing the session. This helps me to keep everything under control and improve myself, improve the topics, and so on. Okay, question?
Yeah, for those who are not TA, can you expand a bit about adult ego state and okay position?
I sort of included this already, that we are assuring that we are here in the here and now logical function and logical being. Thanks for the question, Laurent. And taking responsibility for our countertransferential and transferential responses. I hope that helps. I don't usually over-explain things. I think whichever modality we are coming from, confidentiality and being here in the now, logical state of ourselves, it's sort of universal. Thanks for the question again. So I'm Nia Clark, and living in this country for about 22 years now. And my journey started with 3 suitcases, emigrating to the UK and learning the language from absolutely basic. And now I'm very happy to feel at home in here, and I dedicated myself to coaching people, becoming a psychotherapist and counselor, a supervisor, a trainer in multiple countries. And what I wanted to start with, why I'm dealing with ADHD and what took me on this journey is that lovely girl next to me, who is my daughter. She's nearly 18. Last year, we went to the lavender field here in Yorkshire, and we took a picture. It was really windy, but the lavender was absolutely fantastic. It completely relaxed me. We had a wonderful time. When she was 11 in high school, I was told, well, actually, she doesn't have dyslexia. She probably has ADHD. And I didn't really know too much about ADHD. There was one thing I knew. I was quite happy that my daughter doesn't have ADHD, while my friend's son did show ADHD signs. And finding out that, oh, my daughter also has ADHD really dysregulated me, and I didn't really know what to do with it as a parent. So I started to study it. I started to read about it, learn about it, listening to podcasts, and started to educate myself. What can I do when, as a parent, when she's struggling, when she's dysregulated? Where do I go? And after a while, as I was learning more and more about it, I realized I also have lots of clients who have ADHD. Somehow I drawn clients this way. And that started to take me on a journey, because when I worked with ADHD clients, then I realized I don't have the tools to work with them. So I need to develop something, some kind of methodology, which helps to support them, not just recognize the signs, but move on from recognizing the signs, taking away something from the therapy room, from a counseling room, from the coaching sessions, what they can use in their everyday life and live better, feel better. And that led me to develop my first module, the ADHD treatment pyramid, and then it led me to write books, and it led me to hold workshops and trainings. I'm just setting up my online training program, which will be accessible very soon. So this is my story in a nutshell. And right now, I'm holding neuro-informed supervision, exam preparation support. I provide psychotherapy, counseling, and ADHD coaching for groups and individuals. Also, I hold workshops, not just in the UK, but in multiple countries, and setting up an online learning platform where people will be able to access trainings which are recorded in different topics. I already recorded an ADHD group coaching series with 10 sessions and recorded another one, which is an ADHD coaching foundation. If someone wants to set up an ADHD coaching practice, that foundation program will help. And I will have a 40 hours afterwards, which follows in detail. From probably October, I will be starting a neurodivergent couples course, which will be again 10 sessions, specifically working with neurodivergent couples. And next year, I will be doing an ADHD course. How can we work with ADHD clients, because it becomes a little bit more complicated. So a lot is going on. And today, what we will do, we will be focusing on how can we work with ADHD clients. This session has two parts. We are holding one part right now, and then we will be holding another part in September.
Yeah.
Okay, can I ask everyone just kindly to mute the microphones? And when we arrive, that I'm absolutely happy to be unmuted if we have a relevant question. But that way we can assure that others can hear everything what they want to hear. So I have 3 books out. One of them is aimed to psychotherapists and counselors, is Traveling to the ADHD Mind. This has an extensive program, sort of what I'm talking about in much more detail in that book. And this one has a counterpart, which is the ADHD Practitioner's Kit. It sort of helps the book with exercises, with questionnaires, with ticking lists, different things. You can just take it to your session and help yourself with it. And if someone wants to set up an ADHD coaching practice, there's the ADHD coaching book. It's also working together with the yellow book. If you want to have a look, you can have a look on Amazon. Just Google my name. I think a couple of things will pop up. So these are the 2 courses which I mentioned. I also will be starting a mentoring program from September for people who are working with ADHD clients or neurodivergent clients. Let me know if you are interested. I have my email address or website address on every single slide. Is nia@niaclark.com. Just drop me a line. So today, what we will be starting with is, first we explore what is ADHD, what do you know about ADHD, and look into how can we think about it, how can we contract in the therapy room for it with the ADHD client, and we look into what is the difference between our trauma-informed mindset versus the neuro-informed mindset, and how can we weave these 2 together, and what are the client presentations in the therapy room or the counseling room when you meet the client, and look into the 8 senses. I think this will be a good little start today, and then we will take it further in September when we meet. So let's have a quick discussion, if you are happy to pop into some breakout rooms. What are the ADHD signs you know about? What did you in generally hear about ADHD? or neurodiversity.
The wider systems contribute to low self-esteem because education systems and employment and other systems usually measure success according to very narrow standards that people, for example, with ADHD don't necessarily fit into, and they end up feeling like a failure.
That's a brilliant summary. Is it Thomas?
Toma.
Toma. Thank you very much, Toma. You really well summarized a lot of executive functioning difficulties and issues. This layer will be coming. I just pop back to the pyramid. So this will be the everyday struggles. We will be talking about this in September. I divide the everyday struggles into internal and external organizational struggles. The internal ones are sitting in the head. David mentioned inattentive ADHD. Inattentive ADHDers have a lot of issues around this area. And the external organization sits around us. And when we're working with clients, we need to deal with these very separately. So we will be addressing time management. We will be addressing organization in terms of planning, in terms of categorization, in terms of prioritization, lots of different things. And then the external ones is finding a place for everything, zone things out, making sure we have the to-do lists and where do we keep them, making sure we have the diary management, but how do we keep them, how do we organize our papers, and how do we reset everything on a daily basis? Because if we don't do that, even though we have places for everything, if we don't do the reset, it's not going to be done. So in a nutshell, this is what we will be talking about when we are addressing this in September. So that's the everyday struggles. We will be also talking about procrastination and motivation, which is very often probably one of the first things people come to me with. I created a procrastination hexagon with 6 different types of procrastination to explain and understand what is the root cause of the procrastination, which we're matching with different motivational styles. Usually people work with 1 or 2 or 3 different types of motivational styles, whether it is for themselves or for others, and that's what they apply in their practice as well. So we want to expand this to 10 different types of motivational styles, understanding the different types of procrastination, and then answer that so we can find the doors out with strategy for the client. How can they stop the procrastination and move out of it? And then we will be talking about masking and shame as well. Someone mentioned rejection sensitivity. I deal with rejection sensitivity when we're thinking about emotion regulation. It sort of comes to me in that area, but we will mention it today with the general regulation overall, with the sensory, the emotional, the nervous system, and so on. So we'll look into just very briefly today as well. Anyone else?
This is quite a common thing, but I think, I don't know, probably helps understand ADHD. I've been working with a client with ADHD, and she says herself, and I heard it several times, that you have thousands of thoughts all firing at the same time. So it's a very noisy environment in the mind.
Absolutely. So if we imagine a mind, which is like a Cumbria road, we have a car coming every half day, or imagine a motorway with 8 lines around New York, that's sort of the inattentive type of brain. Yeah, different channels, different thoughts. Sometimes thoughts are going parallel, thinking about one task at the same time talking to another person, but I have thinking about another task. So the ADHD, inattentive ADHD brain can take a lot in, but sometimes it's really destructive. It depends on the noradrenaline level. We probably talk a little bit about neurotransmitters. We won't have too much time. This is only a 3 hours training. And I'm talking about a book here which has over 65,000 words in. So I won't be able to go into detail, but we can have a little bit of a taster, and I try to not squeeze everything in so you feel comfortable and it's not overwhelming, but you also get enough material to be able to take something away and being able to use it with your clients. So let's look into the topic. When we want to define neurodiversity, it's been coined by Judy Singer in 1998, recognizing the brain differences with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and so on. And when we're thinking about different types of neurodiversity, we have lots of overlap in between different things. I just had not long ago when I often do tutorials, and I was supporting a trainee within a tutorial, and she really described to me her dyslexia. And then another day, I was talking to another trainee with saying they had dyslexia, but they actually didn't have dyslexia, they had ADHD. And there was quite a big difference there. The ADHD type of dyslexia looks like the person can really read easily, but the brain is not necessarily engaging with the material. Every 5 minutes, they need to bring their brain back because it sort of wanders away. It depends on the material. If they are really focused, if they are really interested in, then they can focus and they can read quite a lot. So they can read hundreds and hundreds of pages on a day. When they read, they might jump ahead, or they might photo read, or they might skim the page, depending on how much patience and how much calmness they have in their mind. Yeah, that's the inattentive ADHD kind of experience. When they write, they might miss out letters and words, not because they are dyslexic, it's because the mind is so much faster than how their hands can write. And that's not dyslexia, that's inattentive ADHD. The dyslexic brain is very different. With dyslexia, it's very difficult to actually translate these symbols, what we call letters, into words, to process the combination of them, to understand them, whether it's when we are writing or whether we are reading. So the processing of any kind of written material is very slow. They are not able to read long written material. They're not able to read it. They are not able to write it. They need a lot of different tools and strategies to be able to manage this. So it's quite a big difference when we're dealing with dyslexia and ADHD. Also between ADHD and autism, we have quite a lot of differences. Pacing is one of them. Autistic people usually are slow-paced. They take their time to process life. They take their time to process emotional experiences, cognitive experiences. They are very detailed. They are very deep. They are absolutely great thinkers internally. While ADHDers are very fast, they are very creative. They usually think in the full picture rather than in detail. So they are often missing details, but they are creative thinkers and they are able to synthesize and combine things together. So we have lots of other differences as well, but just for today, this is what I thought, let's bring this. In the UK, predominantly, we differentiate 3 main types of ADHD. One of them is the inattentive, the other one is the hyperactive impulsive, and the third one is the combined type. Most of the ADHDers who I come across, they are combined. Some of them are inattentive. The least frequent one is the hyperactive. Just hyperactive impulsive presentation is absolutely rare. And quite often when I'm finding inattentive clients, after a while, we are realizing there is some autism mixed in the pot as well, which will change the presentation quite a lot. There's a lovely book out there. I think it's called The 7 Types of ADD, written in 2012. That's why Daniel Amen is calling it ADD, because in the DSM-4, they used to call ADHD ADD. And now in DSM-5, we're calling every type of ADHD ADHD. So it's changed since 2012. But in this book, he's talking about 7 different types of ADHD, not just the 3. He created a huge, wide research, over 1,000 people, with brain scanning, brain imaging, investigating the different parts of the brain, whether they are underperforming or overperforming. And based on that research, he determined the 7 different types. If you want to read more about it, it's quite a good read about ADHD. He's also talking about lots of different supplements, some of the medications, some of the treatments. His diagnostic area is quite wide, because he's accounting for history, he's accounting for social background, he's accounting for the neurological, brain-related performance, and he's also accounting for psychological presentations and behavioral presentations. Any questions with this? Okie dokie, let's move on. So let's look at the inattentive signs. I think someone started to talk about this already. When we are seeing someone with inattentive symptoms, they have maybe all or nothing thinking. They might have extreme self-criticism or perfectionism, often lack of attention to detail. They don't recognize if something is wrong, numbers, letters. It's difficult for them. They often make careless mistakes, or don't complete the task. They just don't finish them. Easily distracted or forgetful. Losing focus very quickly and misplacing items. I remember my daughter in the primary school, we needed to buy probably a water bottle every month, because she just lost them so many times. And I didn't understand what that was. The teachers back then were not trained either. So we just had to buy water bottles, and it was really hard to get things organized. It was one of the biggest challenges for us. They often struggle with time management, internal organizational issues. They often struggle with procrastination. They might delay important tasks for different reasons. When we get to procrastination, we will explore these reasons. They are often dreamy and spacey. So when children have inattentive ADHD, for example, in school, they just don't listen. They just appear to be lazy or dreamy or spacey. Often we had, when by the time I asked my daughter, can you just run a bath for me? She got up on top of the stairs and she said, Mom, what did you say? Run a bath. 5 minutes later, did you start the bath? Oh, no, you said that. So we had to repeat it quite a couple of times, because some new thought came in and it wiped out the original thought. It's like a little bit of goldfish syndrome. Even though they appear to listen, they might zone out. This happens often on the session. I always check with the clients, are we there? Are we not there? What's happening? Where were you in your mind? Because we mentioned something, then their thought is linking to another thought, then that other thought is linking to another thought. And in their mind, they're 5 thoughts way away from the original topic, what we were talking about. Because this is quiet, it's an introverted type of ADHD. It's not quite often recognized as well as the hyperactive type of symptoms. So often people being diagnosed late after their middle age or late in adulthood, and they had to carry everything, their symptoms, the marks, the how society called them, and they didn't understand. Currently, I'm working with a wonderful gentleman who is in his 70s, and we're making sense of his inattentive ADHD. And it's such a beautiful work. He lived a life as a brilliant architect, but we're making sense of all of these misunderstood internal critical mixture negative beliefs about himself. So let's see the hyperactive signs. Fidgeting is a constant small movement with lots of different things. I often have fidget toys in my clinic, and you cannot see on the shelf, but it's just sort of next to me, behind me there. If we are tapping or chewing gum or any of these different things can help. I usually bring fidget toys which are quiet rather than noisy ones. And quite a couple of ADHDers are speaking very loudly. I have a client who sometimes I feel I might need an earplug. It's not because I don't like him, it's to turn it down so I can process him. I can process what he's saying and how he's saying. He definitely has a lot of hyperactive presentation in his system. They might interrupt things or might cut things middle of the sentence because they just had a very impulsive sudden thought and they had to share that with others. They might be restless and it's really hard for them to sit still. I had a client who we started the session with exercises, standing up and sitting down, or doing star jumps, or doing some squats, because it was really hard after working for 8 hours in the office, coming and sitting with me in the session. The quiet time can be really, really a big struggle. It's difficult to engage with calm activities. So the idea of let's just have some yoga or let's just have some meditation, that's completely out of question. They need to release the energy, what's stuck in their body. So when we're thinking about the hyperactive presentation, it's the energy is in the body. When we're thinking about the inattentive presentation, the energy and the overloadedness is in the mind. It's two very different kind of experience. They can be often late, and they often present a very busy lifestyle with a full-on diary. They might have impulsive actions like shopping, addictive behavior, where they drink too much, take chemicals, and they definitely enjoy movement. Do we have any questions about this?
What about the mixed type?
The mix is, thanks very much for the question. The mix is the mix of these two. And we don't know how is it mixed. We don't know which elements of the hyperactive, which elements are the inattentive will be mixed. So it's always for me a big question. When someone comes to me with ADHD, I'm not thinking I know you. I don't think, oh, I understand you and I can analyze you just like this. I have lots of questions. In my books, I have questionnaires which we can take and questions which we can ask from the clients, so we can recognize which elements are there from the hyperactive, which elements are there from the inattentive presentation. I've got all of these lists from the IDC-11 and the DSM-5. So if you look into these general practitioner handbooks, you will be able to find them yourselves as well. So these are not secrets. So what's not ADHD? I always like to ask this question because ADHD is a hyperactivity disorder. So if we not having any kind of hyperactivity and attention deficit, then we're not talking about ADHD. The attention deficit for me is the important bit because we can see the hyperactivity on the person, but we cannot see the attention deficit. We don't know what type of attention deficit they have. I created an attention deficit chart where we are able to look at what kind of attentions we are thinking about. We're thinking about the selective attention, which is the ability to focus why we are ignoring the surroundings. So for example, someone is talking loudly, or we have a background noise somewhere, we are still able to focus on who we're talking to or being able to read whatever we want to do. For some people, it's extremely difficult. The divided attention is when we are able to focus to multiple things. The ability of, for example, cooking in the kitchen and the kiddo is talking somewhere. Hey, mom, can you look at me? Look, this is my homework. Look, this is what I'm doing with the dolly. However it is, whatever is presenting in the client's life, if they get drained and really tired from trying to listen to multiple things at the same time, then we know they have issues with divided attention. The next one is the shifting attention. It's when we starting a task, without finishing the task, we're moving on to another one. So a very simple example is cooking again. If I'm starting to make the meat, then I start to peel the vegetables at the same time, but I need to watch that the meat is not burning. And then I move back on to steam the vegetables. And then I lay the table with the plates and the cutlery. I go back to the meat. I'm checking if the vegetables are steamed. So I'm jumping back and forward between tasks without finishing them. And at the end, they will be complete. For some people, shifting between tasks is very difficult. You can test yourself how many windows are open on the computer when you are working, how many tabs. If you have a lot of tabs, then you are able to shift between tasks. If you have only just a couple of tabs and you rather like to close them because they are really, really annoying, then probably shifting attention is very difficult. If you're looking at autism, shifting attention is very difficult. The change and the transition between different things are very, very difficult for an autistic person because they are very detailed. So they like to finish things. They like to analyze things. It's really easy for me to understand how their brain requires this, because if we're shifting, jumping back and forward, we would miss the detail. That's what ADHDers do. The sustained attention is the capacity when we are able to focus on something for a longer period of time. There we go. Just realized my computer needs to be plugged in. Hold on. Aha. I have the cable prepared, but it wasn't in the right place. There we go. So the sustained attention is the ability to be able to focus on something for a longer period of time. And with the inattentive thoughts, which are coming into the space, lots of them all the time, it interrupts that focus. For some people, the sustained attention is easy, and for some others, it's really, really complicated. So when we are talking to the clients, I like to ask questions about these things. And I like to recognize where do they have the difficulty, because we can straight away go somewhere. How are we doing with this information? Good.
Can I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
You just mentioned earlier a little bit about ADHD, and I just wondered, obviously, with a client who is autistic, and also may have ADHD, how those two would interact and present?
That's a really big question. Is it Jolie? How do we call you?
No, it's Joe. Sorry.
Joe. Thanks very much for the question, Joe.
I guess I'm just trying to work out, because it will present differently, won't it, with everybody?
Absolutely.
But kind of
Yeah, I call it, it's like a cat in the bag. We don't know what it's gonna do. Is it friendly or is it screechy? We don't know how ADHD and autism will interact. We don't know how much is the autistic presentation. Usually ADHD sits on top of the autism and it covers it. So they need the challenge, they need the novelty, they need the excitement. But once it comes and the ADHD is settled, then the autism comes out with not wanting to change, not wanting to move anywhere, being overwhelmed or drained by things. So it's a very different kind of work. That's why I'm holding the workshop series. It will be 10 sessions next year about this, because it's so much, it's such a big topic to figure out how do we interrupt, how do we manage, how do we explore these things.
Thank you. I guess it, like you say, it is, I find it's harder to know with a client who also has autism. I find it harder
Absolutely.
to know how to approach that as
We
a
don't know.
therapist.
So the
Yeah.
only approach we can do with the our ADHD to start with is inquiry. What do you
Okay.
experience? Where is your mind? What's difficult for you? Where do you get stuck? Where are you? Where do you struggle? Where do you have the impasse? So we're exploring these bits and pieces.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Sarah?
Hi, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask you something, and also maybe to highlight this for other people who might not be aware that my understanding is that there's quite a big body of research since Mirsky's functions from 1991,
Yeah.
which basically says that attention deficit is a misnomer, that it's not about attention deficit, and if somebody has an ability to display sustained attention, if they're in something they're interested in, then it can still be ADHD, and that is in fact a function of ADHD, and that the sustained the factor, the moderating factor in sustained attention is whether somebody has an interest in that, is getting the dopamine from that interest. So I just wanted to draw people's attention to that, because they might think, if somebody's saying, oh, you know, I sat and worked on, I don't know, my Lego for 3 hours last night, you might think, oh, well, that can't be ADHD then, because you've got sustained attention. But
yeah,
of course it can be if it's an interest for them. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much for this comment. You're absolutely right with this. With ADHD, definitely we experience over focus or hyper focus if it's within the motivational link, when the person is very interested in that particular topic. And it takes me again, your comment, to the place, is it really attention deficit? Is it really deficit? Or is it just something, how our brain is set up in a particular way which doesn't suit society? Yeah. So I believe our brain, everyone's brain is like my fingerprint. It's unique. The different parts of the brain, if we go back to the research of Dr. Amen, is different size, and how the different parts of the brain is communicating with each other, again, is unique. Does it fit our societal setting? Maybe not always. But if we look into the ancient times when we had cavemen, and then one of them was responsible for standing outside watching the weather, the clouds, where the wind is coming from, listening to the sounds in the forest, hearing if something is coming, listening to danger. And they were standing there, being able to be one with nature, because their senses were able to link to everything else. Then once they recognized something is coming, the other ones were standing next to them, who were ready for the command, and it was very hard for them to just stand by, and they were ready to run and catch the mammoth for everyone else. So the first one is the inattentive ADHDers, whose mind needs to be tuned into lots of different channels to be able to recognize what's going on. The second one is the hyperactive type, who is ready to go because they have that energy inside of them. Carry on, Sarah.
I was just going to say, you reminded me there of an analogy that I heard when I was, I've got two sons who have ADHD. I have ADHD myself. I'm also have a PhD in psychology with a focus on SEN. And an analogy which I found really useful to understand my boys in school was that if you can imagine a child going into a room with 20 TVs on full volume, and then saying to that child, okay, what's that TV over there in the corner saying? That's the same as saying to a child with ADHD, you've got to focus on what the teacher's saying, because they hear everything and they don't have that ability to discriminate the input that's coming in. So they hear everything, they see everything, they feel everything, and they can't just focus on that one thing.
That's a very, very good example. That's a good example for the selective attention. Thanks very much. Are we ready to move on? So let's quickly look at how things are working. We probably often hear about the frontal cortex. Executive function sits in the frontal cortex. We will be talking about the executive function issues later on in September. And often the frontal cortex is underworking for ADHDers when the noradrenaline neurotransmitter is low or the dopamine is low. We also often have issues with the limbic system or the basal ganglia, which creates emotional dysregulation, miscommunication between the different brain regions. So it's quite hard then to regulate themselves. So if we in the British society, we really don't like people who are angry very fast or frustrated. That happens a lot with ADHDers. I'm one of those. I get the hot flush frustration and anger, and I'm a fiery person. So that I had to learn by time, how can I manage my frustration or anger in the moment when it comes. And then we have a third, the RAS, the rectal activating system, which is becoming sluggish with processing. So we become very difficult and with processing things, and the sensory overload shoots to the ceiling. So it's very hard. As Sarah said in the example, like the 10 different television idea, it's one of those bits. There are two key neurotransmitters. They are more than two, because I often like to think about serotonin, endorphins, GABA, and so on as well. But if you're thinking about medication will be altering our dopamine levels and noradrenaline levels. The dopamine is responsible for motivation, is the reward chemical, and the noradrenaline is responsible for alertness, for function, for the fight and flight. So when we're thinking about these things overall, when a person comes to us, for me, the most important thing is, how can I support them to regulate themselves, to bring that dopamine and noradrenaline level into balance? So the whole program, when we're working with ADHD, is around scaffolding. How can we set up a lifestyle where your dopamine and noradrenaline levels are in balance and your brain is working at its optimum? Not a neurotypical lifestyle, a neurodivergent lifestyle, which suits your ADHD brain and your wiring. And that's the task. That's our job. That's our work, to work together, not for the client, but work together with the client to work this out for themselves. Enable them to be able to work this out for themselves. This takes me to a very big next question. On one of my workshops, beginning of the year, someone was, after about teaching them for 6 hours, was saying like, well, this just sounds like trauma-informed kind of thing. And I was going around in circles. Why does it sound like trauma-informed? I couldn't sleep at night and so on. So I started to look into things. And then what I realized there is an interesting thing. What we are using is method. We're using grounding. We're using breathing techniques. We might even use exercise, which is a methodology. It's the question, what supports the person right now? So if they are experiencing trauma in the moment, which is linked to the past, then we support them with the breathing techniques. We support them with grounding exercises. We support them in all sorts of places. Lots of different industries are building on how can we support a client with trauma. However, when we're looking at the mechanism, where is it coming from? What is driving the difficulty? We experience a big difference. When someone is coming with trauma to us, that's linked to the past, and something drawn them back to the past, and therefore they have a reaction in their system. When we are talking about neurodiversity, it's nothing to do with the past. It's in the here and the now, and it's linked to their nervous system, and it's always there. They might not be dysregulated always, but the reason why they dysregulated and having certain symptoms looks a lot like trauma will be very different. And how we deal with them is very different. A clinical risk is if we're reading neurological symptoms, neurodiversity as trauma, and we deal with it as trauma, start to analyze it and start to go down the trauma route, we're completely missing the client. And a big part of the client will not be understood. So I'm trying to establish around the world the neuro-informed psychology and the neuro-informed mindset, supporting practitioners to be able to separate how can they work with this. So when I'm thinking about the primary lens with the trauma-informed mindset is the threat and the protection. What feels unsafe? How can I support the client to be in a safe environment with me? How does the nervous system defending something from the past, trying to assure that never happens again? With the neuro-informed mindset is the executive function capacity is the question. Where is the client's capacity? Is the client able and capable of engaging with the work right now? What's happening with the attention? What's happening with the working memory? What's happening with the task initiation? Where is the time sense? So I'm looking for completely different things. When a client arrives, I always look for the neuro-informed signs first. Then if I need to move into trauma. So I work with both, but there is a very strong sequence. First, I'm looking at the neuro-informed, then I'm moving into trauma. So the key driver of difficulty with the trauma mindset will be triggers of explicit memory, attachment, injury, or protective type of adaptations. The key driver with the neuro-informed mindset will be the load, the friction, the time blindness, the sensory dysregulation, the dopamine chasing, dopamine and reward dynamics. So I'm looking for completely different signs in both of them. The meaning focus, when the symptoms are present in the space, what I want to know for the trauma-informed, what makes sense in the client's history for me, why the client is behaving in a particular way. While with the neuro-informed mindset, I want to know where are the capacity signals, how much this client can focus. For example, when I mentioned that client who couldn't sit because they were sitting for 8 hours in the office and they needed to move, I could carry on and explaining things for them, but it just didn't work. How are we doing with this? This is a very important basic foundation of this work when we are looking into neuro-informed versus trauma-informed. I will be teaching you in these 3 hours what are we looking for in there and what kind of scaffolding are we building for the clients so they can manage their neurodiversity rather than moving into trauma too early. Should we tell the clients about their ADHD signs? How do we work with this? I just want to open this up to a discussion. What do you think about this? If you see some of the signs we just talked about, how does it show up in the room and what would we deal with it? How would we deal with it when it shows up? Would you tell them? Would you not tell them? You can even pop it in the chat box. Sarah?
I kind of preempt it slightly, actually. And when I'm doing my initial assessment session, I always include questions about neurodivergence. Do they suspect any neurodivergence in themselves? Is there any close members with any neurodivergence? And then that makes it a bit easier to make a decision later on, because quite often people say, yeah, I have thought about going to my GP. I'm mostly, like you say, there's a lot of clients with neurodivergence. So, you know, a lot of people are kind of open to discussing it. And I feel I didn't do that to begin with when I was first starting my training. And then I was getting into quite an ethically challenging time when I just didn't know whether to say anything or not. So I like now to start the conversation earlier.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's a really good tip. Anyone else?
I have one particular client who I see some interesting executive function differences and task initiation differences, which is very much sitting in an ADHD profile of initiating task when the deadline is close. I didn't really feel that the client wants to hear about ADHD. So the way I approached it was asking the client of, okay, how do you do things? And then pointing out that, this is a different type of motivational system.
Mhm.
And not using the ADHD neurodiversity language, just putting in one or two words. So if the client is getting interested in that, they can go away and look at it. But if they don't, they will get some information about their own activation type, or like how do you deal with deadlines and tasks, and that can be useful.
Thank you very much, Laurent. That's another wonderful tip as well. I have a couple of very good comments in the chat box as well. Let's have a quick look. Someone is suggesting to rather reflect on the symptom rather than name it. Depending on the modality, what we are practicing, what way are we practicing. In certain modalities is not appropriate, and some other modalities would be absolutely fine with it. Someone would be hesitant to bring it up, rather exploring the symptoms. And someone else saying they would be very wary of diagnosing. We're not diagnosing. We are talking about traits rather than diagnosis. So, and in our position as psychotherapists or counselors, we are not diagnosing. Someone had the hand up. Just feel free to speak.
Yeah, I had a hand up, but somebody has just mentioned it that, we are not there to diagnose, but to validate and find ways to. So I would say in a situation like this, it would be better off to take it to supervision. But also, I don't know how then do you move forward from that, because there is that thin line. We end up pathologizing, that and introduce somebody to it, and then they get hooked to that. So it's really a tricky one. And I don't know from your experience, how would you? Because some of us, we're still coming up therapists, and we encounter these where you can, after all, you've attended a CPD like this, you've got this awareness now. And, it's your mindset in that diagnostic. Okay, is it ADHD? Is this autism? And you tend to move away, being person-centered and follow what the client is bringing. So there is that thin line. So I don't know, from your experience, how would you address that? Because you're for the client in the room, right? And from, we are there to help them so that they find solutions in whatever is going on in their life which they want to resolve. And then if we do not do that, are we there to help? So there are so many questions which pops up and makes it more complex.
It is complex, Kudvasha. Thanks very much. I have a question back to this. When we are experiencing a bipolar, borderline client, a narcissistic client, do we diagnose? Or are we just recognizing the signs? Are we brave enough to recognize the signs? We probably don't even mention it to the client in the room, but we're taking it to supervision. So in my mind, dealing with autism, neurodiversity, ADHD, dyslexia, any of these is just exactly the same category as we would be thinking about a borderline presentation, a bipolar presentation. We do not categorize it, but for our healthy assessment and for our healthy treatment direction plan, we sort of need to recognize the signs.
Yeah.
This is not for the client. This is for ourselves as practitioners. Someone was saying something. Yeah. Okay, not okay. If you want to say something, carry on. I'm absolutely open to it. Okay, if we don't have any more comments, let's move on. I just have a couple of more slides and then we will see how far we get today. Just a quick one about how does it appear in the therapy room is the client might tunes out, looks at you, but absolutely you can see the emptiness in their eyes. They might not be able to listen to you. Some of the clients have about 10 seconds of capacity to listen to what I might say, and they completely zone out. That's often the case. They might have difficulty to sit. They might be distracted by external noises, an ambulance, the bin car, a bird outside, a bee in the room, whatever that is. They might have difficulties with time management. They are too late or arriving too early. They might don't respond. With inattentive clients, I often have non-responsiveness. It's not because nothing is happening for them. It's rather because it's too much is happening for them and they don't know where to start. I'm always interested in that case. What's happening in your mind? What's happening in your head? What's going on for you? Because we are sitting in silence. And if we are working in a trauma-informed way, silence might be a good thing. When we are working in a neuro-informed way, I'm curious. And I want to name what's happening. I want to draw out what's happening. Yeah, again, we have a big difference in there. They might come with anxiety, but behind the anxiety, actually, we recognizing overwhelm. The overwhelm looks like too much is happening at the same time. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do first. When we are talking about the traditional type of anxiety, often we're thinking about taking something from the past, bypassing the now, projecting out that past negative experience to the future and catastrophizing around it. Yeah, that's anxiety. When we are talking about ADHD, overwhelm, too much is going on at the same time, and I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do with it. I put down eating disorders as well. I'm finding eating disorders are more often happening with our ADHDers than just ADHDers and with autistic clients, but I don't know what is the experience for others. So when I have eating disorders, I often suspect autism with it as well. Bringing back the same issues over and over again, that's again rather an autistic sign. With ADHDers, what I'm experiencing is we're going through an issue and that's dropped, and then we have a new issue and that's dropped, and then we have a new issue. When we have issues circling, that's quite of an autistic sign because they need to analyze that issue from lots of different angles and they need to work out the details, and they use our support in therapy to be able to do that. They often have the core belief that something is wrong with me. I'm too much, I'm too lazy, I'm too stupid, I cannot listen, I mess everything up, something is wrong with my core. And then I pop down fidgeting in the room. If you see them face to face, it's happening. If it's on Zoom or you work online, I'm curious, what's happening with your leg at the moment? What's happening with your hands in the moment? You can only see me just sort of up to my neck, so you don't see the rest of my body parts, as we don't see the client's body parts. So I'm really curious what's happening in there. Yeah?
You mentioned the use of silencers, and I had a couple of experiences with clients who brought up suspected ADHD themselves, and I found that they were talking very fast and continuously. So there was no time for silencers. There was barely any opportunity for reflections.
Yeah.
So
the pacing.
The pacing. So how would you deal with it in a ADHD informed way?
Let them empty themselves out. What I often ask is to let them empty themselves out and then support them to label their topics. So for example, I had a client who switched topics every about 20 seconds. started to talk about husband or ex-husband, then moved on to daughter, then moved on to father, then moved on to other daughter, then moved back to ex-husband, then moved on to their sister. It was all over the place. So what we agreed, the treatment, we worked together for 2 years. And in that 2 years, what we wanted to achieve when she talks, we label it. Now I'm talking about my ex-husband, and then we're talking for 5 minutes. And now I'm moving on to my sister, and then we're talking about the sister. So my interventions were very minimal. I listened a lot, but we labeled. And what it helped with, her brain started to settle down. And in her brain, she started to introduce a new way of being and existing, is labeling her thoughts, categorizing her thoughts. So probably if someone has so much going on, that's where I would start.
Okay, thank you very much.
What you say, what you say there really resonates with a client that I had. I'm ADHD also, so when I had this client who was, we had maybe 2 sessions, and I had this feeling that I was like, well, we're just touching on things like dipping paintbrush into lots of different topics, but never getting any depth. So I just said that to her. I feel like we're kind of touching on so many different things, but like the approach that you say about categorizing, it's kind of what I did. So I said, like, you bring what you want to talk about today, and I'll write them down on the sheet of paper in between us. When I think that you're mentioning the things, I'll point to that category kind of so we kind of had labels, categories. And I think over maybe 4 or 5 more sessions, she wasn't a long-term client, but I think they did clarify what the different pots of paint were, so that if I thought maybe that links with this one, then we could get a bit more depth in the paint pot. Does that make sense? I just thought that was interesting to share with everyone, because I think
Jasmine,
it's similar to what you say. But yeah, creativity of dyslexia and ADHD does kind of help quite well with being a counsellor, I think, personally. It helps me to kind of, right, what's going on, and then kind of pull it apart in a kind of clarifying way for the client. I don't know, because it helps me to kind of put things in some order. And I think that's what happened with this client. So the way you describe it was very similar to my experience, and I think did work. So
fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this. Let's have a quick look, if I can go just one step further. When I'm looking at diagnosis, if someone comes with a diagnosis and we don't need to guess about they being diagnosed or not, or they have ADHD or not, I designed a chart with 2 different ways. One of them is a type of client who celebrates it. They say, oh, I've been diagnosed. Now my whole life makes sense. I'm so happy. I understand what was going on. And they go out and then research, look in the internet, looking at podcasts, all sorts of different things. And then they get to a place of confusion when they go like, oh, it's so much out there. I'm not even sure what's going on. They start to really doubt, and they're not sure anymore whether they have ADHD. They think maybe the diagnosis was wrong. And then as they carry on the knowledge seeking and looking into deeper, they realize, yeah, they actually have ADHD. And then they move into the grief and the sadness and look into why I'm not normal, neurotypical. Why is my brain this way? Why was everything so difficult for me? So then we go through a whole deep processing period. And then they get into a stage of anxiety. How can I manage this? What does it mean for my life right now? And once we build scaffolding with them, then they can accept the whole experience of, okay, I'm ADHD, I've been diagnosed, I'm building scaffolding, I'm learning to manage myself, build a life how it suits me, and I get to the acceptance. The other type of client might goes into denial. They don't want to hear about it. They've been diagnosed, but they don't want to hear about it. They go into confusion. They go into absolute rebel and don't look into anything. They don't want to work with you as working with ADHD. So we don't name it in the room in that case. They might go into anxiety. What does it mean for me? I have ADHD. I don't know, I'm not normal. They might even move into shame. And after a while, they start to raise the interest. So then they start the knowledge seeking and they raise awareness and learn about it. Then they move into grief and sadness. And we get them through this grief and sadness willing to work. So then we can bring the ADHD in the room, we can work with it, we can name it, and we can start building the scaffolding to consciously, purposefully manage it together, and they get the acceptance. So it's interesting what our clients are bringing and how they respond. Jo.
Hi, I just wondered, I know you mentioned about clients that have some sort of neurodivergence and present with difficulties with eating. And I just wonder whether, in your experience, you've found that if clients come to you with difficulties with food, whether ADHD is something aligned that would kind of stand out, and maybe getting a diagnosis might be helpful for them in understanding.
Not necessarily the diagnosis, Jo. If you let me to move into the next topic just for 5 minutes before we say goodbye, that might help a little bit. So I will emphasize a bit of the eating related bits and pieces. I find issues mostly with autistic people, some with ADHDers, but different types of issues when it comes to food and comes to eating. So let me just quickly move on. If I see, don't know what did I, we skip these and we will get back to it. So if I pop over to the senses, and I'm looking into the 8 senses. So the visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, tactile, the 5 external, which probably most of you knows about, and the 3 internal senses, the vestibular, proprioceptive, and interoceptive senses. So you mentioned the food in here. The food will be an interesting one. One of them is the gustatory system, which is the taste. Some people have much stronger sensing taste buds than others. So they might have some hypersensitivity and some others might have hyposensitivity. The hypersensitive ones taste everything stronger, so they want more bland food, bland tasting food, while the hyposensitive ones want more tasty food. But when it comes to food, it's not just the taste, it's also the smell. How does it smell? Again, depending the nervous system, with lots of neurodivergent individuals, they have a very sensitive nervous system. Again, it's not right and wrong. It's just whether I have blonde hair or the other has brown hair or the next one has black hair. We have nervous system which is responding to things very differently. That's our differences. And if they recognize how their nervous system responding to different things, then they are able to build up a management system for themselves. In here, with food, the tactile senses come in as well, because depending on the food, if it's crunchy and they like the stimulation of the crunchiness, that's the tactile stimulational system. If it's smooth like a smoothie, if it's like a mousse, if it's like a saucy, again, it comes back to the tactile system. How does it, the texture, how does it taste, how does it feel in the mouth? I had a client who doesn't like sauces because it feels too slimy for them. They like rather food which is dry and not necessarily saucy. Or I had another client who never would eat warm food. They just don't like the heat. They don't like the warm food. They wait for the food to cool down when they are able to eat it and digest it. So there are lots of different areas and questions within eating, and I like to explore this. In my books, I have an extensive chapter in each of them on these systems, explaining the hypersensitivity and the hyposensitivity. What are the signs for each of these senses? Also, I have a chart for each of them about the management system. How can we manage the hypersensitivity and how can we manage the hyposensitivity? I created a chart, which I call the sensory economy chart, where we can measure, it's your own measurement, but we can put it in a chart, how much hypersensitive a client would have visually and how much hypersensitivity the same client would have visually. So I give you an example. If I talk to a client who really hates Christmas lights and doesn't like the flashing lights, would not go out to a club because it's too flashy and too bright, doesn't like Christmas because of that, but actually really likes the zebra patterns on the wall or on the pillows. So they are hypersensitive in terms of patterns. They're seeking this. They want more of it, but they're hypersensitive towards the lights and need to bring dim lights. In here in the clinic, everything, I have really bright neon lights on the ceiling. I never turned them on. I brought some lovely standing lamps, which has dimmed yellow lights, because that really helps the client's sensory system. Yeah, I don't have a chance today to go deeper into these articles just about this topic. We can have a 5-hour session and talk about it in depth. We have a good 4 minutes. Let me know, how are you feeling? Do you have any questions? I quickly pop to the end. If you want the slides, I'm absolutely happy to send it over to you. Just drop me an email. It's nia@niaclark.com. It's just my name, or you can go to my website, niaclark.com, and send me an email through that, whichever way. Yeah, and I can send you the slides. And if you have any questions, I'm absolutely happy to support. Let me know if you have anything. I know it's a big material. I tried to bring just little highlights so it's not overwhelming and we have a chance to chat. Come back in September. We created with Sally a date for September as well. So we have a second part when we are talking about the procrastination, the motivation, emotion regulation. We will talk about masking. We will be talking about the metabolism. How can we build that scaffolding I was mentioning? It will be again an 1.5 hour session. Thank you very much for spending the evening here, and I hope you had an interesting time. And I'm really grateful for all the comments. I believe it was a really great contribution today to
Hi,
have
Nia.
your examples.
Hi, Nia. I
Hello.
just want to, I don't know whether you mentioned what's your modality?
My modality is a mix. So I'm rooting in transactional analysis, also some CBT, also some DBT, and family systems, IFS as well. So I have multiple bits and pieces what I studied and still practicing, and I'm building a new modality, hopefully will be very popular around the world, which will be called the neuro-informed psychology. So I'm networking with the US, with Australia, with South America, South Africa, and Europe. I've just been in France, I've been in Hungary, I've been in Germany this April to talk on different kind of conferences where I support practitioners, whether they are counseling, psychotherapy, organizational, or coaches, to understand how can we differentiate, not leave behind, differentiate between the neuro-informed mindset and the trauma-informed mindset. Where do we use them and how do we weave them together? Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I've got one.
Okay.
If I were to buy a book, which one of 3 would you recommend for a counselor?
For a counselor, the purple one. So the purple one will have the theory, if you want the theory. If you want practical bits, what you want to take to your session or prepare for your session, then it's the yellow one.
Okay.
So it depends what you want to use it for. Some people really don't like the purple one because it's very theoretical. I have examples in it, but it's theoretical. The yellow one is basically a workbook with questions for your clients, with ticking lists, with bits and pieces you can just copy out and just use it.
And there's the blue one, isn't it?
The blue one is for coaching. So if someone wants to set up a coaching business, then it will have the coaching is a different kind of area because it's not regulated usually mostly around the world. So you can just step out and set up a coaching business tomorrow because it doesn't have the regulatory bodies basically anywhere. We have a couple of them around the world, but they're not regulating like we have UKCP or BACP or anything in there. And within coaching, the fees are also self-determined. So you can charge £150 per an hour. You can charge £50 per an hour. It depends on your marketing abilities. And lots of practitioners from counseling and psychotherapy or general coaches, life coaches are coming to me to train them because in ADHD, we have a shortage of coaches. Not too many people are out there who can support clients. And it's a very nice business to be in these days.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Jovita. All right. Again, thanks very much for coming. Hopefully see you in September. I have much more to talk about. Have a lovely summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.